Everybody, it's Ted Prodromo. It's Tuesdays with Ted. Someday I'm going to count these. No additions. It's like number 62. We'll call it 62. Today's guest is Darren Kanthal. And we were just chatting before this. We went live, and we're going to continue that conversation, but we'll start from the beginning. But welcome, Darren.
Thank you. It's I was, as you say, Tuesdays with Ted. Obviously, the play on the T, and I was like, I got nothing here, but I could be a day with Darren. Maybe I could do that.
Just got to have some resonating feature.
There you go.
So we were going to talk about self-awareness today, but we were kind of talking about we're both in business for ourselves. And go ahead and talk about, you said about the 3 to 5 year mark about a business.
Yeah, there was two things that I was saying to Ted just before we went live, and I was connecting with someone that's in a mastermind that Ted and I are both part of, and someone had told this guy that for the first 3 years of being an entrepreneur, you're often fighting a headwind, so it's a little more of a grind, and you're working through some things, and something apparently happens around year 4 where that wind shifts, and we start hitting more of a tailwind. And it becomes more smooth sailing. And then I was also sharing with Ted that there's 3 things that I feel pretty proud of. I guess the first thing is that a lot of my contemporaries and colleagues and people I've gone through some programs with, somewhere between year 2 and 3, if they've not reached their revenue targets, they're going back to corporate because they need that steady paycheck. And I'm still in this game. The second thing I was telling Ted is that one of my aspirations, or one of my main aspirations, is to never write my own resume again. And that means to me, I'm not going back to corporate, even though I write many other people's resumes. I just don't want to do my own. Mm-hmm. And 3 is 2022 is the start of my 4th year. So hopefully throughout these next 10 months, I'll be experiencing more of that tailwind.
The stars have aligned for you.
I hope so.
Yeah. So let's talk about this self-awareness. You're a coach, right?
Yes.
You're certified from CTI, where I got certified.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great program.
It is really good. I highly recommend it.
How long ago did you get certified?
2001.
Oh man, you got me. Nice. Good for you. So you were at the front end of this coaching wave.
That's it. We were like, there weren't many coaches when I started. And I saw many, like you said, the 3 to 5 year, not many will stick it out 3 years and they move on to something else.
Yeah.
Back to the corporate world. And I love your phrase about never having to write my resume again.
Yeah. Yes.
So how did you get started in coaching?
Well, it's a cool story for me is that, I'm stumbling. There's so much a part of the story. So I'm from New York. And I have some stereotypical New York traits. I also grew up in a household where we screamed a lot, and our conflict resolution style was to yell, scream, get mad, and then we'd work through it. Well, take the New Yorker and the screaming and put it together and put that persona into corporate America. And, many times it's fire and gasoline. And, for a lot of my earlier years in corporate, I shared my opinions freely, oftentimes without discretion, oftentimes without real good thought or deliberation. And I stuck my foot in my mouth many, 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 many times. And in 2008, I was 33 years old. I got let go from a job, and I literally called my mom crying. I was so upset I lost this job. And it was the first time that I stopped blaming you for my problems. And I was like, in all of my stories, I'm the only constant. And from that new perspective, I read a bunch of corporate politics books. And as I read the books, it was very obvious of how not to act in the book. But unbeknownst to me, that's how I acted in real life. Mm-hmm. And so then I was embarrassed and I felt like a fool. And that was really the start of me changing my ways and becoming a little bit more thoughtful and this kind of stuff. And from 2009 or 8 until 2018, I was pretty good in corporate. I certainly had blips and this kind of stuff, but I was pretty good. And in my last corporate stint, I got hired by a wonderful woman who's still a friend of mine. And classic story, senior leadership brought in a new president or whatever the heck he was. And my great boss and he were not in favor. So she negotiated an exit. And the next person they brought in was hands down the worst leader of my career. And so all my old behaviors started coming back. And I hired a career coach. And I specifically said to her, Chrissy is her name. I told Chrissy that I need to figure out how to play nicer in these corporate sandboxes. And her response is still crystallized in my brain. She said, maybe you should change the sandbox. And whatever those words, is that 5 words or 4, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you should change the sandbox. 6 words. Those were the words I needed to hear. And that was the snowball rolling downhill for me to become an entrepreneur. Took me about 4 or 5 months to realize that I didn't want to be an HR consultant, which I thought I wanted to be, and that I wanted to be a coach. And then January of 19, I enrolled in CTI, which is what Chrissy had gone through. Another mentor of mine also went through CTI, and that was the background of how I arrived here.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
There's a book I read. I was in corporate America for years, and I kept doing really well, and I hit a point. I couldn't get past that point. And I kept banging my head, and it's always their fault.
Yeah.
And somebody gave me a book, Leadership and Self-Deception.
Ooh.
And it's just like one of those knock you over books. Like, oh my God, if I would have known this 5 years ago or 10 years ago, my whole career would have been different. So check
I hear that and I believe it. And then I also, on the flip side, wonder, for me at least, if I would have even been open to the lessons earlier in my career, because I wasn't ready to hear them.
Yeah.
Like, it really took me getting let go from that job and crying to my mommy that I finally was like, okay, it's me. It's not you, it's me. And I don't know if, 5 or 10 years earlier, if I would have been open to hearing that.
Yeah. Oh, I had one friend for 40 years. He was in a job, and he had the worst bosses in history for 40 years. Like every boss he ever had over 40 years. Like, maybe you should look in the mirror.
I was on a podcast, and this guy told me this story, and there's a curse word that I won't say. He told it to me much nicer, but he said, if you see a jerk, like if you see one jerk a month, maybe you see a jerk. If you see a jerk every day for a month, maybe you're the jerk.
Nice.
And not saying your friend is the jerk. That was not my intention.
Right.
But it was more of like, when he said it to me, I was like, yeah, I was the problem. I was the jerk, but I was too busy telling everybody else they were.
Yeah. That's where the self-awareness comes in, right?
Yeah. Yes, for much so.
Yeah. If you've married 3 or 4 times, like, maybe what's the common factor here?
Reminds me of another story. A friend of a friend told me on his buddy's wedding day, his dad said to him, "Son, you only get married twice."
Right.
And that was on his first wedding day. I just thought that was so funny. And sure enough, he got married twice.
So how do you work with your clients and talk about self-awareness? How do you introduce the concept to them?
Yeah, it is an onion. On one side of this onion, a way that I love to get to better self-awareness is through a program called Positive Intelligence. And, to bring positive intelligence into maybe more of the organic way, if you will, is that what I've uncovered about myself, and then through many clients and colleagues and coworkers, et cetera, is that we are all plagued by some sort of negative force within our brains. In the world of positive intelligence, we call it the judge, and the judge judges ourselves, it judges you, and it judges our circumstances. Many people align with the imposter syndrome, right? So there's something within us that basically is telling us we're not good enough, which is judgment. I had a mentor that called it a dark angel. Other people call it their Achilles heel. Whatever term you like best, that's what it's built on, it being the judgment we have. Yeah. And so self-awareness to me really starts with recognizing, what are we telling ourselves? Where are we telling ourselves that we're good enough? We're not going to succeed. People are going to laugh at us. What if I fail? And all the other stuff that we tell ourselves. And then the other piece to it is how we react to those judgments. Triggers are a term that many of us hear a lot. We talk about emotional intelligence and recognizing how we show up. To me, the self-awareness is, to make it personal, is that what I learned through my own exploration through positive intelligence is that I was deeply insecure. And when you would get close to touching a nerve of my own insecurity, right, defenses went up, walls went around me, you're getting too close, and then I attack. And the attack is the defense. Well, that is the trigger and my response to the trigger. And now that I'm aware of some of these insecurities and how I find my own sense of worthiness, if you start getting close to these nerves, I am now able to not put the wall up, but identify that, hey, something's going on. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And yeah, listen, I'm not perfect. So of course I still have triggers and I blow up sometimes, but it's far fewer and farther and fewer between.
Yeah.
But really the self-awareness is knowing us, knowing where we're really great. So where are we in our ease and flow? Where are we truly challenged? Where are we insecure or unsure of ourselves? And then how do we act from those places? And if we can start to connect those dots, what I see is fewer blowups. I like to call them emotional wildfires. So we ignite fewer emotional wildfires.
Yeah. No, it's all about, there's things that keep happening in our lives. And we respond the same way. Something triggers it and it's not a good response. So if you can identify those when it's coming on, you can just step back, take a breath, and kind of like, okay, what's going on here?
Yeah. I excuse me, I am not well versed in brain science, so take this with a grain of salt. And if you know more about this, please interject. And anybody listening, if you want to, fact check me, please do. The way it was explained to me in terms of the brain is that when we have these triggers and auto responses, it's almost like a rut. And I mountain bike, and I know what it's like when I'm in a rut, which is my wheel wants to stay in the rut. And if I'm not real careful with how I get out of it, like I could turn my tire just a little bit, and sorry, that might have been loud, but I'm going over my bars and I'm crashing.
Right.
And so getting out of the rut has to be very deliberate and very careful. Now, coming off the mountain bike analogy is that if our brains have these literal or figurative ruts that, my spouse or significant other says this thing that irks me, and then all of a sudden I lose my temper, or you question whether or not I know what I'm doing in my job and I get defensive and then I blow up at you and tell you, screw off, I know what I'm doing, right? That's the rut. And so if we can start to smooth out the rut a little bit by doing different things, by stopping ourselves from going in the rut before we get there, then maybe we can start to change our auto responses and not fall into these auto patterns, if you will. So PQ, or positive intelligence, starts by showing us these ruts, gives us some tools to fill in the ruts. And, if we continue with the practice and give it its fair dues and kind of go through the steps, I'm living proof. I have many clients that are also living proof that the ruts become a lot less defined and the auto responses are not quite as inflammatory.
So when you were in the corporate world, were you doing something you were really good at and you really loved, or was it kind of you were just there for the paycheck?
It was something in between. I worked in HR and I did a lot of work in talent acquisition or recruiting. And I really liked recruiting because there was a definitive start and end to the process, right? We have an open job and we fill it. All the steps in between, I had a lot of autonomy. I was good at it, so I didn't really need to be micromanaged. And so that was great. But kind of like what you described, was my kind of step up before I hit my own plateau was usually about 3 years. 0 to 6 months, I was super engaged by the newness, proving to you I can do it, meeting all the people, all the things. 6 to 12 months, it was like, all right, fine, I'm doing it. 12 to 18 was like, that's where complacency and aggravation started to creep in. And then 18 to 36, if I was still in the same job, like, I don't suspect I was very pleasant to work with.
Yeah.
And then I would wear out my welcome. And
So you got into that rut.
Yes, I got into the rut. So I liked recruiting generally, but I also got not jaded. I think I got bored.
Yeah.
Like the challenge wasn't as great. So I was like, yeah, fine, whatever.
Right.
And I think that whatever complacency then comes across, right? People pick up on that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm thinking back on my career. My first job was 10 years or 11 years. And I was kind of getting to the point I was kind of getting bored with it. But the company took a nosedive and they got rid of all of us.
Yeah.
The next job was like 7 or 8 years. And the next job was like 3 years. The next job was a year.
Well, I've never even had 10 years of tenure. Like 3 years is my longest corporate gig. And right now, running my business is my longest job, tenured career, whatever we want to call it. But yeah,
Job.
right.
Right. Yeah. So you're talking about, focus on what you're really great at and what brings you joy. Like you moved to a new sandbox and you found that joy.
I did. And there's a lot to it. It's funny. It's not funny, but I had coffee with Chrissy, my coach, on Friday. And it was so nice to catch up with her. And, I was telling her how foundational she is in my life. Like she really was an advocate for me when I didn't feel like there was a lot of them. And I mean, she's not the reason that I became an entrepreneur, but she was certainly an influence in me becoming one.
Yeah.
And I bring her up because one of the things that she did that I also do in my practice is she had me do a values assessment that
Mm-hmm.
was, borrowed from a bunch of different ones that she packaged into her own. That, quite frankly, I told her, I said, I took that from you and I've made it my own too now. But I bring that up because what I find is that a lot of us will talk about values, but then can't really communicate what our values are. And in the assessment that Chrissy created and now that I use as well is we have a way of from a list choosing various values, and also we can pull them out.
Yeah.
There's an objective way that we help to prioritize which are our top values without bias, which is quite amazing. Because it's not like I think my family is my top value or I think money is my top value. Is we evaluate value 1 to 2, value 1 to 3, 1 to 4, and so on and so forth. And at the end, you wind up comparing each one on a one-to-one basis, and whichever value you chose the most is your highest value.
Interesting.
And with those values, what I often see is that when people are the most unhappy, it's because their values are completely in misalignment.
Mm-hmm.
And on the flip side is when they're in their ease and flow and they're happy and they're excited and they're smiling and they're enjoying life and they're resolving conflict effectively, is their values are in alignment with what they do day to day.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the pie in the sky. I think a lot of us associate success with money, position, power, tangible goods, etc. I would challenge that and I say, I think success is when you are living a life where values are in alignment.
Yeah.
And I think these other things kind of fall in line with that because you're not fighting every day. You're not trying to run uphill with a 50-pound pack on your back or whatever. Like
Right.
you're just moving along, doing your thing in a very happy, content way. And it's not all peaches and cream, but it's closer to it.
Yeah. No, I've done that values with clients and they would say, like family's number one, honesty, integrity. And like, but you're cheating on your wife and you're stealing from people and you're doing business with. And they're like, no, it's okay. It's still my values. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
so
and we
really
know
kind of,
from the CTI world, right? I think they call it the captain or the leader within
yeah,
are the terms, right? About like when we're at our best, like who is the captain of the ship?
yeah,
The captain of the ship is the person who's in alignment with what they believe, what their values are, their morals, right? They don't say family's number one and then go cheat on their wife, to your point. Like
right.
your captain is not driving the ship in that scenario.
So this is something to work with someone to work on this. You can't really sit down and do this yourself. Like you can go through your values, but if you don't have someone really, that's what I liked about CTI. You could tell if we were talking to somebody, you could tell from their facial expression what they're saying isn't really what they mean.
Yeah. 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 And that's it's another cool thing about coaching is that, I remember going through fundamentals, if that's what they called it when you went through, is, our instructors said something like, we as humans think that everybody wants our advice, but as a coach, don't give advice. That's the first thing you got to forget.
Yeah.
And it was really amazing because then it was more about like, just show up and listen. One of the tenets of CTI is to dance in the moment. Right. And
Yeah.
so if I'm just going with you and dancing as we go, maybe I pick up on your nonverbal clues, right? That you're telling me family is number one, but I can see it on your face that something's not aligned, and like being able to call it out and say, what's going on there, right? That doesn't seem like you really believe that right now, or whatever the saying is.
Right. And active listening was a big thing we learned.
Yes. Active listening.
Like, what are they really saying?
Yeah. You know, it's amazing. It's funny, not funny. It's amazing you say that, because what I found was that I was so concerned with what I was thinking that I couldn't hear what you were saying. And someone had said to me, make tick marks. So one of my first coaching clients, I was sitting with her in person and my pad was on my lap. And they said, every time your mind wanders, make a tick mark.
Ooh.
My mind wandered 23 times in 1 hour. It was like
only 23?
only 20, yeah. About like dinner, bike, whatever. I don't even remember anymore. It was, many years ago now, but it was eye-opening of how I couldn't even be an active listener because I was too busy upstairs in my own head.
Right. Yeah. We get so much going on. Our to-do list is so long these days. It's like, I'm thinking about my next call and the next call and the next call. It's like, what do we do? What am I going to do after that?
Yes.
What's for dinner?
And it's part of the self-awareness. Like I was judging her at times, judging myself at times. It's all these things. It's fascinating.
Yeah. So how can people learn more about what you do?
Well, on LinkedIn, I guess I'm lucky enough. I'm the only Darren Kanthal out there. Our name is German, from Germany, and my grandparents escaped World War II, Nazi. Good for them, not so good for their family, which is sad. But we're the only Kanthals. Our lineage is the only ones in the States, which is kind of cool. And then my website is candidcareercoaching.com.
Okay. And who's your ideal clients?
So I work.
Who do you love working with?
Yeah, I love working with mid-career leaders, and quite frankly, it's ranks that I achieved in my corporate experience. And from some anecdotal data that I've seen is that much of coaching and some of the deeper professional development is really given much more to C-level, or the truest of senior ranks, and it's the middle. And a friend of mine calls it the critical middle, whom achieve many, or if not most, of the results and get the least amount of professional development dollars. And so I play really well with these mid-career leaders, and whether they're looking for a new job or looking to elevate their performance in their current gig, I do all of that, and really like that population of that mid-career leader.
Like you said, that's a sandbox you were in. You're familiar with it. I see so many executive coaches they never were executives. Like, how can you coach CEOs if you've never been in that arena?
Yeah.
And they don't do well.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can, but we also don't have the perspective of what it's like to sit in the boardroom. Right. We don't know. I don't know what it's like to make a company-wide decision that goes bad. Yep. I mean, I've made some pretty big decisions, I think, but not at the level of CEO.
Yeah. It's okay to stretch a little bit beyond your expertise and experience, but yeah, some people just put the shingle out there like, okay, good luck.
Yeah. There's a guy on LinkedIn that I forget his name off the top of my head, but his headline in LinkedIn says, "Not a life coach." And I thought that was pretty funny because he's, mocking us a little bit. Well, not even a little bit.
Right.
But yeah, like it's one of those titles that anyone could use. And like in any industry, right? There's used car salespeople in every industry. No offense to used car salespeople, but it seems like every industry, every function has them. And hopefully for the good ones, we do a better job than the ones that do a bad job.
Yeah, everybody's running to the hottest new things.
That's right.
But it was actually 2 years ago. There was 2 million life coaches or coaches on LinkedIn.
Oh man,
there's almost 7 million today.
Wow, really? Man,
talk about pivoting.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, you're the front end. You must have been in the first. I would assume less than 1 million. You must have been the first of just a few.
There was only 2 companies that had real certifications.
Wow.
2 training companies, and CTI was one of them. And they've been around for a few years.
Yeah. Do you remember what the other one was?
No, I don't remember. They're
accredited,
real certifications where you had to go through exams and yeah. But buyer beware. That's what I keep telling my email list.
Yeah.
Make sure
Love
you
it.
do your homework. Are they really good coaches? Are they really qualified? It's pretty dangerous out there sometimes because they are giving advice and they shouldn't be giving,
Yeah.
and they're crossing into the therapy, which is very dangerous.
Yes. Yes, I agree. I
So
agree.
great, Darren. This has been awesome. Great catching up with you.
Thank you, Ted. I like this. This is my first LinkedIn Live.
There you go. And what's your website again?
CandidCareerCoaching.com.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Ted. Good to see you.